Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take the most complex, compelling stories and break them down into essential insights.
And today, we are immersing ourselves in a narrative that, well, it captivated Silicon Valley, the media, and ultimately the criminal justice system.
We're talking about the turbulent and spectacular story of Elizabeth Holmes, the founder and, of course, former CEO of Theranos.
Our mission today is pretty straightforward. We want to offer you a comprehensive and structured look into the source material that really defines this complex tragedy.
Right, we're trying to go beyond just the sensational headlines.
Exactly. We're going to examine the details of her early life, the audacious technological claims, the catastrophic collapse of her company, and of course the final criminal consequences.
Think of this as your essential roadmap to understanding one of the most significant cases of corporate fraud in modern history.
And the central paradox is what makes this story so sticky, so enduring.
It really is. Here you have a biotechnology entrepreneur who promised nothing less than a revolution in medicine. She was claiming she could conduct dozens of complex blood tests using only a minuscule sample.
Just a few drops from a finger prick.
A few drops. And she stood on this promise to make healthcare cheaper, more accessible, and, a lot less intimidating for people.
But that technology, which was the very core of the company, it never successfully materialized. The promises were built on exaggeration, illusion, and ultimately deceit.
And that led to her eventual conviction for defrauding investors.
What's astonishing to me is just how long this illusion was maintained. It was fueled almost entirely by venture capital and this perception of legitimacy.
And the financial timeline of the story is it's a dizzying, head-spinning ascent.
It truly was. I mean, in 2015, based on Theranos' staggering $9 billion valuation, Elizabeth Holmes was recognized by Forbes.
As the youngest and wealthiest self-made female billionaire in the United States.
Right. And this designation wasn't based on market performance or, peer-reviewed scientific breakthroughs. It was based on speculative investment into a company that was largely operating in stealth mode.
The financial world bought the vision completely, hook, line, and sinker.
The reversal, though, was just as fast and far more public.
Following that investigative journalism that exposed the fraudulent nature of the technology in 2015, Forbes revised her estimated net worth.
All the way to zero.
All the way down to zero by 2016. And in the court of public opinion, the verdict was equally damning. That same year, Fortune named her one of the world's 19 most disappointing leaders.
The journey from self-made billionaire to corporate pariah took barely 12 months.
Just incredible.
In that rapid decline, it all culminated in the final legal outcome. She was convicted on 4 counts relating to investor fraud, 3 specific counts of wire fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud.
And in November 2022, she was sentenced to 11.25 years in federal prison.
On top of that, the court really emphasized the financial harm by ordering her and her former business partner, Ramesh Sunny Balwani, to jointly pay a massive $452 million in restitution to the victims of the fraud.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We need to trace the roots of this ambition. We have to look back at the foundations, starting with her early life, which offers some really intriguing context for the intense drive and focus she later displayed.
Right. Elizabeth Ann Holmes was born in Washington, D.C. in 1984.
And her family background is often cited as a contributing factor to her high-stakes ambition.
Definitely. Her father, Christian Rasmus Holmes IV, he held a high-level position. He was a vice president at Enron, the energy company.
And of course, Enron's collapse, which involved one of the most infamous accounting fraud scandals in U.S. history, is critical context here.
It is. Now, while her father was not implicated in the fraud, that environment of immense corporate ambition and then spectacular failure was certainly part of her family's experience. Her mother, Noel Ann, worked as a congressional committee staffer, so the family was squarely in that realm of D.C. power and influence.
What's also fascinating is the historical family pride, tied to this past American success story.
You're talking about the Fleischmann's yeast connection.
Exactly. Sources note that her paternal great-great-great-grandfather was Charles Louis Fleischmann, the founder of Fleischmann's Yeast, a hugely successful, pioneering American corporation.
And a close family friend observed that her parents very much yearned for the days of yore when the family was one of the richest in America.
So it suggests this powerful generational drive to restore or reclaim a dynastic level of success, a pressure Elizabeth likely internalized.
That ambition manifested very intensely when she attended Stanford University. She enrolled, focusing on chemical engineering, and quickly got involved in research, working in the lab as a student researcher.
And her inventive spirit appeared early on. In 2003, she filed her first patent application, which was for a wearable drug delivery patch. So you can see that early interest in disruptive medical tech.
And soon after that, the central idea for Theranos emerged, and it was driven by a really personal motivation.
Right. She cited a profound fear of needles, a phobia common to many people, and she wanted to develop a method to perform the most comprehensive blood tests using only these tiny amounts of blood from a finger prick.
She framed this goal publicly as a way to democratize healthcare, removing that psychological and physical barrier of a standard blood draw.
But the immediate reaction from the established medical and scientific community was highly skeptical, dismissive even.
Absolutely. She pitched this idea, this concept of harvesting vast amounts of data from a few droplets of blood, to our medicine professor at Stanford, Phyllis Gardner.
And Gardner's response was immediate and firm. She said, I don't think your idea is going to work.
Right. And we should probably get into why it wasn't going to work. The science is key here.
Yes, the scientific reason for that rejection is crucial to understanding the fraud itself.
It is. The challenge is multifaceted. Standard lab tests, they require a sufficient volume of venous blood drawn from a vein because the chemical markers and proteins being analyzed have to be highly concentrated and stable.
So when you use capillary blood, the blood from a finger prick, you face these massive obstacles.
Two big ones. First, the sample size is tiny, which means the sample has to be diluted significantly to be processed by machines. That introduces massive instability and inaccuracy.
And the second issue?
Second, capillary blood just has a different composition than venous blood, and it's subject to contamination from tissue fluid. For highly sensitive, wide-ranging tests, medical experts knew that the volume and stability requirements just couldn't be met by a single finger prick.
And the sources confirm that many other expert medical professors told Holmes the exact same thing as Gardner.
They did, so she was faced with this critical mass of expert rejection.
Yeah, she didn't pivot. She didn't abandon the idea. Instead, she found a powerful non-medical endorser.
And that led to the crucial early legitimization from her engineering advisor and dean at Stanford, Channing Robertson.
Robertson was the key.
He was. He chose to back her ambition despite all the medical community's warnings. He became the company's first board member, and most importantly, he leveraged his huge network to introduce her to venture capitalists.
Which helped her bypass the rigorous scientific due diligence she should have faced.
Exactly. Robertson's endorsement, based on his engineering influence rather than medical expertise, was really the initial shield for the company.
With that endorsement secured, she drops out of Stanford School of Engineering in 2003, using her tuition money as seed capital.
And it was originally founded as Real-Time Cures, but the name changed pretty quickly.
It was soon renamed Theranos, a portmanteau of therapy and diagnosis.
The sources suggest this change was highly calculated. The founders decided people were just too skeptical of a startup promising a cure.
So by changing the name, they were aiming for legitimacy and acceptability, which maybe indicates an early awareness that their claims were stretching believability and needed to sound more institutional.
And this foundational phase also established the deeply problematic corporate culture that would later be exposed at trial.
Right. Ramesh Sunny Balwani, whom Holmes was in a clandestine romantic relationship with, he advised her from the very beginning, although he didn't officially join as COO until 2009.
And their joint leadership, it was defined by employee accounts of a dysfunctional corporate culture, described specifically as one of secrecy and fear.
The mandate was to maintain the illusion at all costs.
Absolutely. Employees who dared to raise concerns or objections, especially about the accuracy of the technology, were usually marginalized or fired by the pair.
This environment of professional intimidation was absolutely central to making sure the truth about the scientific failures never leaked out to investors or to the public.
And that fear factor was certainly effective in maintaining stealth mode, which is where this story truly becomes a Silicon Valley parable. The funding arrived in massive waves, even while the company was operating with extreme secrecy.
By late 2004, Holmes had already raised $6 million.
The momentum was incredible. By 2010, without any proven public-facing technology, Theranos had accumulated over $92 million in venture capital.
That just shows the sheer power of the narrative she was selling.
And they maintained that protective stealth mode, no company website, very few public details, until September 2013.
This is when they announced the pivotal partnership with Walgreens, positioning their new blood collection centers inside Walgreens stores.
That move transformed them overnight from a secretive tech success into a consumer healthcare provider. It drastically raised the risk profile for potential failure.
And that initial secrecy did nothing to deter the highest-profile investors in the world. When the company finally collapsed, the roster of individuals and families who had lost hundreds of millions was just shocking.
It included media mogul Rupert Murdoch, who lost over $100 million.
Well, we also saw huge losses for the Walton family, of Walmart.
The DeVos family, including future cabinet member Betsy DeVos, the Cox family, and Mexican billionaire Carlos Slim Hilou.
The breadth of these losses really shows how successfully Holmes targeted and convinced the wealthiest strata of American society.
Okay, let's talk more about that power of perceived legitimacy, which you mentioned earlier. Holmes was remarkably successful at recruiting what sources dubbed the most illustrious board in U.S. corporate history.
That description is completely justified.
It really is. This wasn't just a collection of savvy business people. These were individuals who had held the highest offices of power and military authority in the United States. Their names were synonymous with institutional trust.
It's worth detailing who these people were and the specific credibility they lent. George Shultz, former Secretary of State under Reagan, was the first major board member. He met Holmes in 2011.
The board eventually included Henry Kissinger, another former Secretary of State.
And you had serious military gravitas. William Perry, former Secretary of Defense, and James Mattis, who would later become Secretary of Defense.
Also serving were respected legislative figures like Senators Bill Frist and Sam Nunn, and heavy-hitting former CEOs, including Dick Kovacevich of Wells Fargo and Riley Bechtel of Bechtel, one of the world's largest engineering firms.
These connections acted as a profound psychological barrier to questioning the company's claims. I mean, if Henry Kissinger is on the board, how could the technology possibly be fake?
That is the core question. They were not medical experts, yet their presence lent political, military, and corporate trust to a medical device company.
They were an insurmountable firewall against skepticism, at least initially.
They were. They allowed the company to bypass the crucial medical validation steps that any real biotech firm would have to undertake, like peer review or full FDA approval.
The board was essentially a demonstration of power and political capital that substituted for scientific data.
It was powerful enough to implicitly tell the world, trust this company because we do.
And at the same time, Holmes meticulously cultivated her public persona. Before 2016, she was universally hailed as a visionary.
Oh, absolutely. She was named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people in 2015, Woman of the Year by Glamour, and the youngest ever recipient of the Horatio Alger Award.
She even served as President Barack Obama's presidential ambassador for global entrepreneurship. The acclaim was just staggering.
And a key element of this public image was the deliberate appropriation of the Silicon Valley mythos, specifically revolving around Steve Jobs.
The black turtleneck sweater.
Exactly. This was not a casual fashion choice. It was a clear signal to the tech community.
And the sources provide conflicting yet telling anecdotes about this choice. She claimed she either started wearing them as a child around age 8 or when she founded the company in 2003.
Right, but one former employee claimed they specifically suggested in 2007 that Holmes adopt the look, copying Jobs' iconic Issey Miyake turtleneck, solidifying the idea that the look was a piece of deliberate corporate costume design.
And the voice is another extraordinary detail of this constructed persona.
It really is. For years, in public appearances, she spoke using this deep, unnatural baritone voice. And this detail became a significant focus because former colleagues and professors, including Phyllis Gardner, denied it was her natural pitch.
It added another layer to the performance, a physical and vocal commitment to embodying this serious, disruptive, male tech founder archetype.
And that layer of performance was confirmed much later. In a 2023 interview after her conviction, Holmes spoke in her natural, noticeably higher pitch and admitted that the low voice had, in fact, been an affectation she maintained for years.
When you realize that even her manner of speaking was deliberately manufactured, it just underscores the intense, systematic effort she put into creating the corporate mythology around Elizabeth Holmes, the genius CEO.
This detailed fabrication brings us to the inevitable, terrifying friction point, the moment the illusion began to unravel.
And that decline started in 2015, driven not by regulatory failure at first, but by persistent investigative journalism.
And that journalist was John Carreyrou of the Wall Street Journal. His investigation started from a crucial tip he got from a medical expert who found the technological claims about Theranos' machine, the Edison device, to be impossible.
Carrie Ruud then spent months secretly interviewing whistleblowers, ex-employees who knew the internal truth, and reviewing company documents that confirmed the scale of the deception.
The moment Holmes realized the investigation was underway, the company launched an extremely aggressive and chilling campaign to suppress the story.
She retained the powerful, high-profile lawyer David Boies, who initiated a campaign of legal and financial threats against the Wall Street Journal, and far more distressingly, against the whistleblowers themselves.
He was trying to silence the truth before it saw the light of day.
Despite the powerful legal threats, Carrie Ruud published his bombshell article in October 2015, and his revelations were comprehensive and devastating.
He confirmed that the proprietary testing device, the Edison, was giving erratic and inaccurate results.
Crucially, he revealed that Theranos was circumventing its own failed technology by processing the vast majority of its blood tests, up to 90% of them, using commercially available machines from other companies, like Siemens.
Machines that required standard venous blood draws. Theranos was essentially a fraud hiding behind borrowed technology.
And Holmes's response was not retreat, but immediate theatrical defiance.
She dismissed the Wall Street Journal as a tabloid and appeared on CNBC's Mad Money the evening the article was published.
Right. The sources recount that when Jim Cramer noted the article was pretty brutal, Holmes didn't offer an explanation.
No. Instead, she offered a classic Silicon Valley line of defense, positioning herself as a visionary martyr. She said, "This is what happens when you work to change things. First, they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world."
She was trying to conflate her alleged fraud with the necessary struggle of great innovators like Jobs and Gates.
But the regulatory bodies were already closing in, joining the journalists.
In January 2016, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, which oversees clinical labs, inspected Theranos' California lab. They found serious irregularities.
Things concerning staff proficiency, procedure documentation, and equipment maintenance.
And the regulatory action escalated significantly from there.
It did. By July 2016, CMS banned Elizabeth Holmes for 2 full years from owning, operating, or directing any blood testing service.
And that was an effective death blow to Theranos' ability to legally function in the U.S. healthcare sector.
The business fallout was instantaneous and dramatic. Walgreens, recognizing the existential regulatory threat, immediately ended its partnership.
And they closed all 40 of the in-store blood collection centers across Arizona and California.
At the same time, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, also stepped in.
The FDA ordered a halt to the use of the company's capillary tube nanotainer device. That was the central component designed to collect those tiny finger prick samples.
A move that effectively crippled the company's ability to use its proprietary, unique testing method. It confirmed that their flagship technology was not fit for use.
Legal challenges also started to materialize at the state level.
Right. In 2017, the state of Arizona filed a consumer protection lawsuit, alleging that Theranos had sold roughly 1.5 million blood tests to consumers while deliberately misrepresenting the facts about the accuracy of those tests.
And Theranos chose to settle that lawsuit rather than face the evidence in court.
The terms included agreeing to refund the cost of every single test purchased by consumers and paying substantial civil fines and attorney fees, totaling $4.65 million.
Which was a tacit admission of responsibility to the consumers they had harmed.
Then the financial hammer, the one that truly cemented the fraud, fell in March 2018.
That's when the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, charged both Holmes and Balwani with massive fraud, alleging they had raised over $700 million from investors through deliberate falsehoods and exaggeration.
And the specific claims, detailed by the SEC, are what fully illustrate the sheer audacity of the deception. 2 claims stand out above all others.
First, they falsely claimed that their proprietary technology was being used by the U.S. Department of Defense in combat situations, a powerful appeal to investors based on that national security endorsement.
And the second claim, related to revenue, is frankly staggering. They falsely claimed to have secured a massive $100 million revenue stream for 2014.
What was the actual number?
The actual revenue for Theranos that year, according to the SEC's investigation, was only $100,000.
Wow. That's a difference of 3 orders of magnitude. A 1,000-fold exaggeration.
Purely designed to justify the outrageous valuation they were seeking.
So Holmes chose to settle the SEC charges in 2018.
She did. She paid a $500,000 fine, returned 18.9 million shares to the company, relinquished her voting control, and importantly accepted a 10-year ban from serving as an officer or director of any public company.
And that settlement was a massive red flag for any remaining believers.
The company was now past the point of salvage. Theranos formally dissolved in September 2018, distributing its minimal remaining cash and assets to creditors.
Which brought the corporate narrative to a conclusive end. But the legal troubles were only just beginning.
The civil penalties and the corporate collapse were swiftly followed by criminal action. In June 2018, a federal grand jury indicted both Holmes and Balwani.
The indictment was severe. It accused them of 9 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud.
The prosecution alleged they engaged in 2 distinct criminal schemes. One scheme designed to defraud the investors who provided the capital.
And a second scheme designed to defraud the patients and doctors who relied on the inaccurate test results.
And both pleaded not guilty.
The path to trial was long and fraught with delays. It was first pushed back by the sweeping impact of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Then it was further delayed due to Holmes' pregnancy. The trial finally commenced in August 2021 in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California, and it became an instant media spectacle.
Holmes herself eventually took the stand for 7 days of testimony. Her defense strategies centered largely on shifting blame for the operational and financial failures.
She claimed she was consistently misled by her staff regarding the Edison technology's true capabilities.
And critically, she introduced her relationship with Balwani as a defense mechanism, arguing that he held extreme sway over her throughout their more than decade-long romantic and professional partnership.
She claimed he was controlling, berating, and abusive, and that he was attempting to fundamentally alter her personality and create a new Elizabeth who suited his vision.
Now, it is essential to be precise here about what she testified regarding the specific criminal acts.
Right. While she detailed the alleged abuse and control exerted by Balwani over her personal life, she also specifically testified under oath that Balwani had not forced her to make the false statements to investors, business partners, or directors.
So she maintained that the abuse was about control, not specific criminal coercion in those instances.
Exactly. And after months of testimony and deliberation, the jury delivered a complex, divided verdict in January 2022.
Holmes was found guilty on 4 specific counts of defrauding investors, 3 counts of wire fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy.
But the split verdict provides crucial insight into the jury's perspective.
She was found not guilty on the 4 counts of defrauding patients.
And that distinction is paramount. The jury found she had criminally defrauded the people who gave her money, but not the people who received the inaccurate health information.
The sentencing followed in November 2022. She received 11 and a quarter years in federal prison.
The judge recommended she serve her time at Federal Prison Camp Bryan, a minimum security facility in Texas. And she secured a brief delay to arrange childcare before beginning her sentence on May 30, 2023.
And the financial penalty, as we mentioned earlier, it bears repeating due to its magnitude. Holmes and Balwani were jointly ordered to pay $452 million in restitution to the fraud victims.
A staggering sum reflecting the severe financial losses experienced by investors like Murdoch and the Walton family.
The legal drama didn't end with incarceration, though.
Not at all. Holmes quickly appealed both the conviction and the sentence to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. Her legal arguments focused on alleged trial errors.
Things like the admission of certain government reports and analysis and restrictions placed on the defense team during cross-examination of a former Theranos lab director.
But this appeal process was ultimately unsuccessful. The sources indicate that in February 2025, the Ninth Circuit rejected all her arguments and affirmed both her conviction and the 11-plus-year sentence.
However, the Bureau of Prisons, operating under standard guidelines, projected an early release date in 2032, about 2 years early, based on credits for good conduct time.
So now, moving beyond the strict legal timeline, we really must address the complex and sensitive personal relationship that was so intertwined with the company's trajectory.
Specifically, her decade-long relationship with Ramesh Sunny Balwani.
This was a deeply clandestine romantic involvement that started almost immediately before Theranos was even founded.
They met in 2002 when Holmes was 18 and had just graduated high school. Balwani was 37 and married, though he filed for divorce later that same year.
Their romantic relationship began around 2003, and they eventually moved in together in 2005.
Balwani's role was far more than just her romantic partner. He was her constant advisor. And as the company grew, he took on the critical role of chief operating officer in 2009.
And the sources confirmed they jointly ran the company, establishing that pervasive culture of secrecy, intimidation, and fear that was used to protect the fraud.
During the trial, this relationship became central to the defense strategy when Holmes introduced serious allegations of abuse. And we have to handle this information with careful objectivity, referencing only the court record while acknowledging the gravity of the claims.
Right. She testified that Balwani exerted extreme control over her life, and that over the course of their relationship, he berated and sexually abused her.
She described a situation where the control extended to her very sense of self. She claimed Balwani explicitly wanted to kill the person she was before she met him and systematically create a new Elizabeth.
And this testimony was aimed at presenting her as a victim of psychological manipulation within the confines of their partnership.
And as the sources reflect the court record, we must note that Balwani has categorically and forcefully denied these abuse allegations in court filings, labeling them as false and inflammatory.
This leads us to another sensitive aspect of her testimony, an account of prior trauma. Holmes testified that she had been raped while she was a student at Stanford in 2003, and that she sought comfort and solace from Balwani immediately afterward.
It's important to note that this specific claim of a past assault has some external confirmation from documentation. In January 2022, NPR obtained a partial police report dated October 5, 2003.
And that report showed Holmes had called the police regarding a sexual assault that occurred at a fraternity house at Stanford.
She connected this traumatic experience directly to her professional motivation and the founding of Theranos.
She stated in her testimony that she was questioning how I was going to be able to process that rape experience and what I wanted to do with my life, and that she decided the way forward was to build a life by building a company.
It was an attempt, she claimed, to channel profound personal devastation into world-changing ambition.
Following the collapse of Theranos, and as the legal scrutiny intensified, Holmes's personal life underwent another transformation. She began dating hotel heir William Billy Evans in 2017.
They became engaged and were reportedly married in a private ceremony in 2019.
And they started a family amidst all the legal turmoil. She gave birth to their first child, a son, in July 2021, just as her criminal trial was about to start.
Their second child was born in 2023, shortly before she was scheduled to report to prison.
The second pregnancy, however, became a contentious issue in court filings.
The prosecution accused her of conceiving the child as a deliberate legal strategy to delay the start of her prison term.
Holmes denied this accusation. She stated that she wanted to continue to grow her family and that the child was conceived before she was formally indicted, which she said she did not anticipate at the time.
The repercussions of the Theranos scandal have a cultural footprint that extends far beyond her personal life and the courtroom.
Yes, the sources note a concerning phenomenon. The case is said to have created a significant stigma for other female entrepreneurs, particularly those working in highly technical fields like science and healthcare.
Technology journalists report that the frequent comparisons to Holmes are pernicious for these female founders.
The narrative of the brilliant, ambitious woman who turned out to be a massive fraud has regrettably cast a shadow of public and investor skepticism over other legitimate women aiming for innovation and disruption in these difficult fields.
And the compelling nature of the story ensured its rapid translation into popular culture.
The foundation was laid by John Carrier's meticulous investigative book, Bad Blood: Secrets and Lies in a Silicon Valley Startup, which really remains the definitive account of the company's downfall.
Then came the media adaptations. The HBO documentary, The Inventor, Out for Blood in Silicon Valley, which chronicled the rise and subsequent regulatory exposure.
And perhaps most widely consumed, the Hulu miniseries The Dropout, which starred Amanda Seyfried, who won major accolades for her portrayal of Holmes, including both an Emmy and a Golden Globe.
It is a measure of Seyfried's powerful portrayal that it actually halted other adaptations.
That's right. Jennifer Lawrence had been attached to star in a planned film version of Carrie Rue's book, but after seeing the miniseries, Lawrence reportedly called off her film project, acknowledging that Seyfried had already captured the role so completely that a remake was unnecessary.
Okay, let's synthesize this extraordinary arc. We've traveled from the generational ambition of the Holmes family through the glittering heights of Silicon Valley adoration to the stark reality of federal prison.
Recapping the key components, we have to recognize the structural power that sustained the fraud, the powerful network she cultivated. The illustrious board members like Henry Kissinger and George Shultz, they provided crucial early cover.
Their presence lent governmental and political gravity to an operation that possessed zero scientific validation. This reliance on personal connections over rigorous technical validation was the fatal flaw in the VC community's due diligence.
And we must also highlight the critical role of investigative journalism. John Carreyrou's tenacity, often working against severe legal and financial pressure from the boys' firm, was the essential force that brought the reality of the situation to light when all other institutional checks had failed.
And finally, the legal findings delivered a sharp, clarifying distinction. She was definitively found guilty of investor fraud.
Right. And the specific details defining that fraud, the enormous discrepancy between the claimed revenue of $100 million versus the actual revenue of just $100,000, coupled with the false claims of Department of Defense usage, clearly demonstrate that the goal was explicitly capital acquisition through deception.
So if we connect this to the broader picture, we see a profound failure of the venture capital ecosystem itself.
It really is. The entire edifice of Theranos was sustained for years by the power of perceived legitimacy. The pedigree of the board, the glowing press coverage, the manufactured persona, all allowed an enterprise built on falsehoods to thrive.
It raises an extremely important question about the standards of due diligence in the hypergrowth tech world. Were the red flags, the lack of peer-reviewed data, the avoidance of external audits, the aggressive secrecy, were they just ignored because the names attached to the company were too big to fail?
That's where the true societal lesson lies. The narrative that high-profile people make good business choices led to financial decisions based on fame rather than forensic accounting or scientific validation. It was a failure of the system built on trust.
It is an incredible story of ambition, trauma, and ultimately deception woven into the mythology of Silicon Valley's fake it till you make it culture pushed past the breaking point.
And what's fascinating here, even as we close the chapter on Theranos, is the endurance of the entrepreneurial drive, even in the face of profound legal consequences.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to consider.
Despite her incarceration and the Ninth Circuit affirming her conviction in February 2025, Holmes gave an interview from prison later that year, where she stated she still intended to revolutionize the medical testing industry.
How might the massive public scrutiny, the affirmed conviction, and her status as a convicted felon affect any potential future attempt to re-enter the field, even decades from now? The story of Theranos is closed, but the story of Elizabeth Holmes may still have chapters left to write.
A complex question for you to mull over as you navigate the complexities of innovation, trust, and public redemption.